Hello everyone, welcome to class 101 group number 4. Today I would like to introduce our partner Kara Rhoda, Jimmy Dang, myself, Carl Huynh, Chris Oliveras, and Sean Quinna. Our group project job talk about the Macy fraud case 2024. I would like to start the question number 1. What were the fraud? The fraud was the Macy accounting fraud case on November 25, 2024. Question number 2. How long did it go on? My answer. The accounting department consumed approximately 151 million in delivery express between late 2021 through November 24, 2025. Thank you so much. I would like to pass the question number 3 to my partners.
Hi, my name is Kylie Huynh, and today I'm going to first be going over who was involved, alleged, and or proven in the court of law. So, first to start off with the people involved in this court case, it would be the one former Macy's employee that was not publicly identified by Macy's, and they allegedly concealed approximately $151 million in delivery expenses over several years. The actions were discovered during an internal investigation that was followed by another person involved, the Macy's management. They launched this internal investigation and delayed the quarterly earnings report while reviewing the financial records. Other people involved were like the independent auditors that basically worked with Macy's during the investigation and audit review. Last of the other people involved was the audit committee of Macy's board of directors that basically oversaw the independent investigation as a whole. Now versus the alleged versus proven, it was alleged that the employee intentionally hid delivery expenses. The fraud was committed by only one employee and that there was criminal wrongdoing. What was proven in the court of law was that Macy's stated accounting irregularities occurred after its internal investigation. Macy's also restated the affected financial information, and there was no criminal conviction or court judgment that had been announced at the time of the disclosure. Now I'm going to go over if this employee had to face any jail time or pay any fines regarding this court case. And the short answer to that question is no. Although Macy's did find that an employee was intentionally concealing delivery expenses, no criminal charges or jail time or fines were issued and charged to this person. Instead, the employee just left the company, and Macy's responded by improving its financial accounting and internal controls and oversight. This is important because not every accounting fraud investigation results in criminal penalties. Usually, the company just bounces back and tries to improve their internal controls so that this doesn't happen again.
Hello, my name is Shane, and I'm going to touch upon how the legislation changed and why this type of fraud is actually pretty likely to happen again. And one clear thing is there's no real major legislation changed, as only Macy's Inc., investors, and the government were really involved. I'd say people as a whole weren't really affected by this fraud, and there was no real change that internal controls couldn't, or a change in internal controls could produce. However, the fraud strengthened and proved right these two of these existing controls that we have, which is the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and it was violated, which then had the government step in, and the act required the companies to properly audit themselves. And with this fraud, Macy's had to undergo a long and costly internal review to see what truly went wrong, and eventually found it. And the other step of that is the SEC reports. And with these SEC reports, due to the internal audits, Macy's had to delay their earnings report and really work with the government to make sure every number matched, kind of nipping the fraud and finally putting everything back together, or starting to put everything back together. And I truly believe this fraud could happen again. I believe Macy's has learned their lesson, but it's more than likely to happen to a different company, just maybe not $154 million worth. See, all of these kind of contributing factors were together in this perfect storm type of conundrum, and if all the proper controls aren't put into place, there's no reason something that happened to Macy's in 2024 couldn't happen to, say, Best Buy in 2026.
Hi, my name is Kara Rhoda, and I'm going to go over some of the measures that should have been taken to prevent this statement fraud using concepts we've learned in Accounting 101. So the first one would be the segregation or separation of duties. This is the splitting of financial tasks, so no one single person has control of all phases of transactions. Specifically, there should have been more control over authorization, so this would include having a separate person approving the transaction and having a separate person recording it. There should have also been more protection around custody, so controlling who has access to what and monitoring system passwords. The second concept that we've learned in Accounting 101 that could have been applied to prevent this fraud would be detective controls, such as internal controls, which are frameworks used to identify and correct errors. So specifically for the Macy's fraud, there should have been periodical checking of comparing financial results to historical trends. And there should have been a periodic checking of audit trails and log reviews, so reviewing who has access to the transactions and seeing who altered what. Other examples of internal controls would be using accounting software to check for discrepancies and flagging any overstated or understated expenses. Okay. So to wrap things up, I'm going to just talk about some additional / interesting information about this case specifically. So the first one is that it was carried out by a mid-level employee, which again kind of just further emphasizes why there should have been more security around using generally accepted accounting principles. The second interesting fact was that it wasn't for personal gain. This was a minor error carried out by the employee, and then they continued to understate the expenses as a way to cover it up. Overall, it didn't affect the cash flow, and the error also had a low impact on investors simply because of Macy's large-scale business. However, their profits were already trending downward, and the correction to make up for the understated expenses drove their profits even further downward. In conclusion, this just kind of reflects the weakness of Macy's internal controls, and it emphasizes the importance of separation of duties. And that's all. Thank you so much for listening.